anyone else joins us, then that is amazing. So I just wanted to say hello and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Louise Siwicki, and I am an executive fertility coach and a fertility in the workplace advocate. I'm also head of development for the European Fertility Society. And I just want to thank you, as I said, so much for being here today, for taking time out of your busy day to participate in what is a really important discussion topic and something that is gaining a lot of traction. It's global infertility rates are on the rise, and they're certainly not declining anytime soon. So it's something that we really need to raise more awareness about and discussion. And so that's why we're here today. I'm very excited to announce that I have two amazing speakers. We've got Samantha Patane here and Glen Stubbings, who are here they're going to be sharing their personal stories through infertility through the lens of both their professional and their personal perspectives. I think fertility is such a personal journey to go on. So storytelling for me is really important, and really understanding, for those who don't know or haven't been on the journey, understanding what it's like to go through infertility through the lens of somebody who has, a day in the life is really, really important. And we're obviously here to talk about fertility in the workplace, but specifically through the lens of your psychological well-being and how important it is to really look at fertility in that holistic way. We are recording this, so for anyone who is listening back, I want to say hello as well. If there's any questions, put them in the chat box or save them for the end, and we're all happy to answer. We're all open books. We're here to educate, we're here to raise awareness. So any questions, nothing's off limits. So if it's personal or professional, please feel free to come forward, and we will answer to the best of our capacity. So I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of me, I guess, and why I'm so passionate about starting the discussion, and then we're going to really get into it. So for me, my journey was 6 years through infertility. We did it all. We did IVF, IUI, pretty much every assisted reproductive medical treatment that you could think. We did it, and I just didn't fall pregnant, not once. It was horrendous. I hit rock bottom physically and emotionally. I ended up with celiac disease, chronic fatigue, adrenal fatigue, and depression, and it was a really dark place to be. I was trying to manage work. I was working for a legal transcription company. I was working in a very stressful job. I had long hours. I had a lot of pressure, and back then, about 10-ish, 11-ish years ago, fertility was even more taboo. It just wasn't talked about at all. So I was so scared to tell my workplace because I thought it would adversely affect my career. I just didn't say anything for about 5 years. And it really got to the point where I just couldn't take the trauma of learning about another failed pregnancy test by email and then having to go into a client meeting and present like nothing had happened literally 2 minutes later. I used up all of my sick leave, my holiday pay, my holiday leave. I was using unpaid leave for doctor's appointments, specialist appointments, time off for mental health, all of these things. It was a really bad place to be. I eventually told my workplace, but there was no real understanding. There was no, they were okay. But nothing changed. And the stress of my job, I truly believe, contributed to the length of my journey, of my fertility journey. So I left. I left after I went on maternity leave, and I didn't go back. And they lost a really good worker. They lost somebody who was loyal. I was giving 150% to my role, and I was there for 6 years. And I was a good, and unfortunately this incident isn't isolated. It's happening all the time, and I guess that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm so passionate about speaking about this issue. So that's a little bit about me. Okay, so today let's get a bit of an understanding, like, what is fertility? What is the psychological impact of fertility? You know, how does it, and how does this actually impact your organization? Like, why does it matter? The current support, because there is support happening and it's gaining a bit of traction, but why is there still a gap? Why do I believe there's still a gap? I'm going to give you a couple of case studies of a larger organisation and a smaller organisation, so you can see that fertility specific workplace strategies and policies, procedures, communicate, all these things, it's not difficult, and it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be just for the larger organisations. Any size organisation can easily implement fertility specific policies, procedures, and become fertility friendly. And where do you start? So, you know, what's the roadmap forward? So let's look at, you know, let's have a look at that for you as well. All right, so 1 in 6 will struggle to conceive. So that's 18% of your workforce at any one time are struggling to realise their dreams of parenthood. And when I say parenthood, I don't say parenthood because it is not just a women's health issue, it is a people issue. 50% of infertility is male factor, and I think the media and I think public opinion and a lot of the noise on the outside leads us to believe that this is just a women's health issue. It's not. And also, I'm really excited to have Glen with us because he's providing the partner view as well. So he's also providing a male perspective, which is really exciting because I wanted to provide balance, but also the partner view, because the partner goes on the roller coaster with us as well, and they can feel very trapped and not necessarily feel that their feelings are validated or so for me it's really important for us to understand that this affects people, and that's nearly 20% of the population, global population. 1/5, like it's 1/5, like it is, the figures are startling. And the mental health issues associated with infertility, studies have shown, are similar to those that are going through cancer treatment. So depression, anxiety, stress, they all can become so overwhelming. You know, every single one of my clients comes to me. 95% of people struggle with fertility burnout at some point. You know, you hit rock bottom, and it's really difficult to successfully navigate your career and your fertility journey at the same time from this place. So what's infertility? Infertility is a disease that's classified by the World Health Organization as someone who's been trying for 12 months or more. And if you're over 35, it's only 6 months that you're classified as, I hate using this terminology, as infertile, which I'm against this terminology, but I believe that we need to use it in this context. Primary, secondary infertility. Obviously, primary infertility, if you don't have a child already and you're struggling with fertility issues, diagnosed with infertility, then that's primary infertility. Secondary infertility is obviously then if you have one or more multiple children and you are consequently struggling with infertility. And secondary infertility is actually becoming more and more prevalent in our society. A lot of my clients are struggling with secondary infertility, and it happens a lot more than we realise. And I think the thing with secondary infertility is there's a stigma around secondary infertility because there's a lot of communication around, well, you should just feel lucky that you've already got a child or children, or at least you know you can have children. You know, all of this language that we're using is very triggering for someone who is struggling with secondary infertility and can be very detrimental to their mental health. I struggled with unexplained infertility. And there's obviously different types of infertility, but for me, unexplained infertility is when, I guess, on paper, there's nothing medically stopping you from falling pregnant. There's no medical reason as to why. And this can also be very confusing and very confronting because there's no label, there's no reason why, and you seemingly can be doing everything right and nothing is working. So it is these labels can be very confronting, and then the communication that is subsequently used can be detrimental to our mental health. So these are the mental health statistics that I wanted to show. And this was a study done by the American National Library of Medicine back in 2018. 76% experience anxiety, people who are struggling with infertility. 56, depression. 39% experience some sort of major depressive disorder. And the most startling is 9.4% either thought about suicide or tried to suicide. So this really magnifies and showcases the mental health implications of fertility and why it is so important to look at our fertility holistically. We need to prioritize our mental health as much as our physical health. And I'm going to leave that for the moment, and I'm going to introduce Samantha, and she's going to give you a bit of an overview of her story. So let me just stop sharing. And Samantha, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you, everybody, and thanks so much for your time. Just to give you a bit of a rundown as to who I am. So I'm Samantha Patane, as Louise mentioned. I've been working for about 10 years in organisational development and change management. So I really understand the people impacts and the importance of people engagement. And I always thought like policies and procedures were always pretty well written. And I never thought I would ever have to call upon any policy because I thought everything was relatively fair and equal. From a personal point of view, like I've been married for 6 years. Myself and my partner are very healthy and happy, and we've got multiple pets. And I think 1 year into our relationship, 1 year after we were married, we kind of went around and went, it's about time that we start a family. So we went through the process and we thought we'd instantly fall pregnant. And as per a lot of people that go through this journey, you know, and I hate using the word infertility, but the infertility journey, yeah, you start to realize that it's just not working and it's not as easy as what everybody keeps advertising it to be. You know, you get taught in school that it just happens and it wasn't just happening. And I think the hardest part is you kind of blame yourself. You start thinking, is there something wrong with me or my partner, or what's actually happening here? So professionally, I was high performing. I am high performing. You know, I've worked in multiple industries. I've worked in retail, manufacturing, and the health industry, and it's majoritively been change management and organizational development. So I've done a whole bunch of stuff in this space, and I've kind of understood the value of getting people feeling like they belong and connect to an organization. And it's funny because when this infertility journey started, I was really hesitant to tell work. And for someone that actually writes policies and supports organizations to actually have inclusive practices, it kind of makes you wonder why someone who writes these policies hesitates to mention it to the workplace to kind of say, okay, I'm going through a journey and I need your support because I'm going to have to go through all these procedures. I'm going to have to go through all this different stuff. You know, I'm even going to have to go through all this hormone treatment, which is going to make me a little bit crazy. So expect that. And so I kept it a secret for about 4 years. So my fertility journey took me 5 years to finally have a baby. We went through 15 cycles with our fertility doctor and 8 rounds of IVF. So it was really intense, very expensive, very stressful from like not only a financial point of view, but really an emotional point of view. 3 out of those 5 years, we kept it a secret. We didn't tell people that we were going through this process. And it was really difficult because I think to myself, you have early morning appointments to go and, you know, check out how your hormones are tracking. You have scans, you have multiple doctor's appointments. And I was doing it without anyone really knowing. I was doing it early in the morning. I was doing it in between lunch. I was kind of fitting it in where I can. And then you have to go through the procedure, which is 2 days that you have to take off. Plus, you know, you have to do all this other stuff. So it kind of all accumulated. And it got to the point where I just needed to do something about it. And you know what? There was a point that I actually felt pregnant and I thought everything was sorted. Mind you, the anxiety of everything kind of sticks around. You kind of think, is this too good to be true? I've been told no so many times. Is this actually going to stick? And unfortunately, I went through a really severe, well, it was a late miscarriage. So at 18 weeks, I lost my baby, and it was pretty traumatic because I had just told work that I was pregnant a week prior, and then I lost my beautiful boy. Uh, uh, it was tricky because I think the workplace was really struggling to manage me in some ways. When I returned to work, no one talked about my loss. No one even asked me how I was tracking. My boss was pretty good. She kind of, she was very aware of my mental health and wanted to make sure I took off the time I needed. But I needed to work. I needed to earn money. I needed to get to the workplace. My husband just lost his job. It was an added pressure for me to get back to work. I wasn't ready to go back to work, but I needed the money. Um, and so it was funny because that particular workplace that I was at, they actually had a meeting. I was told previously that they had a meeting to just say, don't bring it up with Sam. We don't want her to have a mental breakdown or anything like that. So just don't talk about it. Don't mention it. She'll be fine. And I was told that a little bit later. And look, I'm not here to trash the business. Like, they did what they think was the right thing to do. I think as humans, it's human nature to kind of turn around and go, we don't want to talk about bad news. How many times have we entered meetings or spoken to colleagues and said, how are you? And, we might just respond with good because it's easier to say good than actually how you're feeling. Um, so, it's relatively clerical from my point of view. It was really difficult to navigate that and having to, no one firstly wanted to talk about it. And then I had to manage my emotions in between everything else. And my husband and I went straight back onto the IVF journey straight after us losing our first baby. And it was exhausting. It was exhausting. And I think a big part of it is, I wanted to keep performing. I wanted to prove that I could handle it. And so I kind of fell into a space where I was actually trending towards high performing depression, where I was kind of pushing myself to just ignore everything. I didn't talk to my husband very much. I just kind of worked all the time because I was good at work. It gave me some sort of self-esteem because everything else was failing, it felt like. So from a working point of view, everybody thought I was fine. I was cheering meetings despite me like crying just a moment ago because I just got some bad news. Got into a meeting, looked really happy and cheery, and everything's going really well. And then I get off the phone and I'm depressed again. So I think it's really tricky to go through this process. And equally, I think to myself, it's so hard to even talk about it sometimes. And I'm lucky enough to say that I'm beyond the point of everything because now I actually have a baby and he's 3 months old a couple of days ago. So I'm very, very lucky and I feel very blessed that we got there in the end. But the idea is I wanted to share this because it's important to start the dialogue of how this actually feels for an employee who's experiencing this. I'm high performing. I know I can do my job really well. I dedicated everything to every business I worked with, but you know, businesses want to support their employees, but they just don't know how to manage this. And getting support from, other organizations who actually are specialized in this space will actually support, the way that you can manage your employees through this process. So, after I went through my loss, I really worked hard with that organization to kind of go, okay, let's update our policies so no one ever has to feel how I felt when I went through that process. And
Yes.
I got some of the stuff through, but that was that.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being so open and honest with us. I really appreciate it. Glen, would you like to share your story with everyone?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Thanks, Louise. And Samantha, it's a wonderful story. Well done and congratulations. The more I hear about these IVF stories, the more that it sort of rings home that you're not alone, and there's so much similarity between our stories. Similar to Louise, my wife and I, we were diagnosed, I guess you could say, diagnosed with unexplained infertility, which I'll get to in a little while. And similar to Samantha, our boy's just over 3 months as well, so fairly close. So our journey started probably about 6 years ago now. My wife and I, we were together for about 8 years before we started trying for children. It was something that we had always wanted. We had always spoken about it. It was just that we got together quite young. So we got married, and similar to Samantha, we had decided that the time was right for us to have a go at having a family, but it wasn't to be naturally, and we were trying for just over a year before it was my wife suggested that we should maybe see a doctor and get some tests to see if there's anything underlying there, and that's how our infertility journey essentially started back in 2018. At this time, we were pretty optimistic still about having a family. Quickly after our first appointment with the IVF specialist, we went into our first cycle. Again, fairly optimistic. It ended quite quickly. None of the eggs had fertilized. So if you've ever received that phone call on day one or day two, I can't remember exactly what they classified as, but that was going from 100 to 0 pretty quickly. That was quite hard to take. And from there, I guess the optimism just went away very quickly. And it became one of those things that, from being optimistic and thinking that, yes, it's definitely going to happen and, we'll have a family, to very much a feeling that it would never happen for us. And it's a pretty downward and quick slope, really, because in the end, I think our journey was about 4 or 5 years as well. We went through about five cycles. Our cycles were fairly spread out, mainly because they couldn't find anything wrong with the initial cycles. So there was an element of trying the same thing, I guess, and hoping for a different result, which some people call it insanity. But that's where we were. In amongst that, my wife had surgery for endometriosis, so there was a bit of recovery time with that sort of thing. And through certain periods, we just decided to take 2 or 3 months off, just more for mental health, and hoping that we would come back to a cycle nice and refreshed and at our best. So in the end, after our 5th cycle here in Australia, we were told that they could no longer do anything for us. And having already gone through multiple doctors, and at this point we were with a infertility specialist that specialized in really difficult cases and took on the cases and the patients that weren't having success elsewhere, that was hard to take. And essentially it was really left for us to figure out what next steps were. So credit to them, he was very honest with us and allowed us to sort of dictate what that journey would be, never influenced what we should do or suggested what we could do. In the end, for us, the option was egg donation. Egg donation in Australia is not easy because you either need a known donor, which really relies on someone who's extremely generous, but also someone who's finished a family. My wife and I are probably on the older side of our friend group, so a lot of our friends and family were only starting families themselves, which again adds another layer of complexity when a lot of successful pregnancies are around you, at work, at home, in society. It's when it rains it pours, they say, which was not easy to take. So in the end, our journey took us to overseas for egg donation, and we were very blessed and very lucky that we had our little boy after going through a cycle in Barcelona. So pretty soon after that, a little bit like Samantha was saying, it was one of those things that we couldn't quite believe. We were very, very anxious during that first 12 weeks, even right up until the birth, really, that any little sort of minor inconvenience or minor pain or anything like that, our heads go to the worst, and I think that's very much a hangover from the IVF experience, because during that 5 years, you're basically told, as Samantha said, you're basically used to bad news, and absolutely infertility. For me, I can only speak for myself, it absolutely changed me as a person. I used to be an extrovert. I used to be very outgoing, would love to catch up with friends, go out, enjoy myself, to someone who actually looked forward when we had lockdown during COVID, because it gave me, it didn't have to justify why I didn't want to leave the house. COVID was well and truly over, and I was still essentially in lockdown. mentally. I very rarely left the house. I lost a lot of my friends, a lot of my family who I disconnected from. And then from a work perspective, which is relevant for this call, over those 5 years, I actually left 2 organisations that I absolutely loved, because although both organisations had a good culture, going through an infertility journey was just that extra little bit difficult to do so at companies that I felt very connected to and very socialized with. I needed to go to an organization that I was disconnected with. And similar to Samantha, I was always pretty, performed pretty well, did well during the day, and just suddenly left organizations. Would that have been different? Probably, if I wasn't going through, we weren't going through IVF. Could the organisations have done more? I'd be a hypocrite if I said yes, because I never sort of raised it with them to do more, and I think both would have been very much open to that. But I guess just for me, the byproduct of going through this journey over the last 5 years was that I left organisations that I was going well at and really loved, and even still to this day, I still keep in contact with them, but it was just one of those things. So I guess I'm here today to contribute to that conversation. Louise might have mentioned at the very start, happy to answer any questions around myself as a person or as an employee. But very much thankful for Louise to give me this opportunity to share. And I think together we can certainly do more. I think it starts with family friendly and infertility friendly policies. What more can we do? There's probably a lot more, maybe not for today, but we have to start somewhere.
Amazing. Thanks, Glen. I really appreciate you sharing your personal story with us. And I think both stories really highlighted the need. And I think Glen just kind of, he was working for 2 organizations that he loved working for, but because he did not feel like they understood, he had to leave. And I think, infertility is it's a silent disease. A lot of the time we don't know. I say that there's 18% of your workforce that are struggling at any one time. I mean, you mightn't even know anyone, but we all know someone who knows someone, or if it's not ourselves, but potentially we don't actually consciously know because they haven't communicated that with us because it's a silent disease. So I think a takeaway from that is, let's get on the front foot as organisations. Let's start the conversation. Let's open that pathway for discussion. And that creates a sense of safety to come forward and say, hey, this is what's happening with me. Can we put a roadmap forward? I think is my takeaway from that. Prevention is better than cure, so to speak. Let's get on the front foot. Let's start. We know there's, as I said, you might not know officially that there are people struggling, but there are definitely people struggling in your organisation. I can guarantee that. And by getting on the front foot and starting the fertility awareness, opening the discussion, opening the lines of communication, that is such a powerful way of saying, here, we support you. Here's a safety life jacket, and let's chat. How can we put together, how can we work something out that's going to be mutually beneficial for you and for me? All right, I'm just going to share my screen again. All right, now. Okay, so how does it impact your organisation? I mean, it's obvious, we're all intelligent people, but another study showed 61% didn't feel comfortable talking to their employer about their fertility journey. And I tell you what, it's probably a whole lot higher than that. I know I didn't. Obviously, Samantha said she didn't. Glen said so. In this conversation, 100% of the people didn't feel comfortable talking to their employer because I was scared that it would adversely affect my career. I had a lot of career aspirations. I was doing really well, and I didn't want anything to affect that. And I think the fear and the anxiety and the stress can become overwhelming, and we start to live in this constant state of fight, flight. Cortisol levels go through the roof. You know, it is very difficult to successfully balance your career and your fertility journey at the same time when you are living in this constant state of fear, constant state of stress. Nearly 70% use sick leave or fertility appointments or medical health days. That's exactly what I did. And I used them all up, all of my holidays as well. So then I was having to ask for unpaid leave, and they didn't know why. I was making up reasons as to why I needed it. 36% will consider leaving their job, and I think this is really important. We're losing good people because we're not educating ourselves, we're not raising an awareness, we're not opening the discussion, and all of these things are so simple to implement. Like, I know everyone has so much on their wellness agenda. I know it's overwhelming, the to-do list. I know it's just another thing that we've got to think about. Like, I get that, you know, we're all living in this world where it's just go, 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 go. There's 1,000 tabs open. You know, how on earth are we going to get through all of these things? But I think that the one thing that I really want to stress with all of this is it's really simple. It can be very cost effective, but it is so powerful, and it is something that affects 1 in 5 in your organization. So that, to me, is something that really needs to be at the top of the wellness agenda. You know, I'm on a mission, you know, and we're all on a mission to change the landscape of how we view fertility in the workplace. It is so important to us to ensure that it happens. You know, I had a lady come to me the other day, and I'm going to read this out because I don't want to get it wrong. She said her manager, she suffered 4 miscarriages, and she'd been on her fertility journey, I think, for 3 and a bit years. So at the start, the first miscarriage, she said her boss was very empathetic, gave her the time off she needed, so on and so forth. By the time she went to her boss after the 4th miscarriage, her boss said to her, "It's not a competition of who is more vulnerable. We all have stuff going on. If you don't do your job, someone else will." And that is just after she suffered a fourth miscarriage. You know, this can't be happening now. And it's just from a lack, in my opinion, a lack of education and awareness of really what do we need? And it's such a simple fix. Okay, so what's the gap? Okay, so there's so many organizations out there. It's gaining a lot of traction, which is really exciting. The flexibility around time off, days in lieu, you know, flexible working hours, working from home, and even some financial incentives, benefits to help with fertility, which is so exciting. And this is so needed and definitely alleviates some of the stresses, especially from obviously the financial side of things, because it's so expensive. If you're going through constant rounds of IVF, it can be tens of thousands of dollars per round, depending on what clinic you go through. So the everyday Australian, we don't always have that. Well, we don't have that money, so we just have to find it. So this is obviously just adding to the stress. But what we're not doing is we're not focusing on the mental health side of fertility. We're not prioritizing that. We're not putting that in the same category as the physical side. And obviously the physical side of fertility is really important, but we need to equally focus on the mental health aspect of fertility, because if your people are living in a constant state of stress response, they're overwhelmed with stress, anxiety, paralyzed with fear. You wake up in the morning, that's all you think about. You go to bed, that's all you think about. You daydream about it in the middle of the day. You cannot give everything to your job. It is not possible in that state. But what is possible is when, you know, and this is what I work with my clients all the time, to give them the tools, give them the strategies, to give them the support they need to be able to successfully navigate and balance both. It is possible, but you need the right support. You need the right support, you need the right strategies, the right tools in order for that to happen. All right, I've got 2 case studies. 2 case studies, one large organisation, obviously being Macquarie Group, they are massive, and a smaller organisation. So I wanted to show you how fertility benefits can be implemented in organisations of any sizes and why these are so successful. So Macquarie Group, so they wanted to implement fertility benefits to obviously support their employees, reduce stress, increase productivity. So what did they do? They They implemented, so they actioned financial assistance, which is amazing. Flexible working options, which is what can be done in any organisation. That doesn't cost a thing. Support services, and this is key, I think, offered free fertility programs for emotional support and wellbeing. And this is the key to providing holistic fertility support, emotional wellbeing programs. And these are conducted by fertility trained professionals, so not just counselling services, because although counselling services offered by the EAP they're a great service, they don't understand the intricate details of someone who is struggling with fertility and the emotional needs, the very specific emotional needs of someone who is on their fertility journey. Education as well, educating their HR, managers, leaders. What is fertility? What does it look like for a day in the life of someone who's on their fertility journey? How can we best manage fertility? What is it? What are the signs to look out for? Because chances are somebody mightn't come forward. Can we? What signs can we look out for to best support them? And how can they feel safe enough to come to us and say, this is what we need? So the results: productivity, obviously, enhanced productivity, employee well-being, improved overall well-being, and it strengthened the corporate image. So I think this is also a really important point, to become an employer of choice. There are a lot of employees these days are looking for fertility benefits as part of their package. So to become an employer of choice, this is a really amazing benefit to offer your employees. And at the end of the day, you get to keep the good ones. You get to attract the good ones, and you get to keep the good ones. And I think that that's really, really important to come away from. All right. Alight. Okay, so this is a smaller IT company. They wanted to improve productivity and employee wellbeing through supportive policy. Okay, so number one, they put in a health plan coverage. So this includes fertility treatments and consultations, which is amazing. Paid fertility leave, offers specific leave for treatment and recovery, which is also incredible. Flexible scheduling, which is what we talked about. Different work hours, working times, working from home locations, whatever you need. Looking at, IVF is a full-time job. It is another full-time job. There is unexplained times during the day where you need to be at specific appointments, and that's all last minute. You can't look a week ahead and look at your schedule and say, okay, well, I've got my IVF cycle happening and I need XYZ time off. It is literally the day before sometimes. So understanding that as a manager and being flexible around that is so important. Once again, education, communication, key. Let's start the discussion. Let's open the lines of communication. Let's truly understand what it's like. So what are the results? So productivity, enhanced focus and efficiency from supported employees, improved morale. It's a no-brainer, isn't it? And reduced turnover. You're saving dollars as well at the end of the day. Like, that's what this is about. Keeping good talent, increasing productivity, and increasing profitability as well. Like, this is what, that's what it comes down to. And workplace culture, fostering an inclusive and empathetic environment. And I think the key takeaways from these two case studies, why they were so effective, is because they looked at fertility through a holistic lens. They supported their employees through a holistic lens that was struggling with one of life's toughest challenges. It enhances productivity, profitability, morale, and really fosters an environment, empathy and understanding. And I think at the end of the day, you're all here because you care. We're humans, we have a heart, we care. And we want the best for our people. That's why the three of us are here today, because we want to create the discussion, to start the discussion, to create the awareness. So if we are, can help one person feel seen, heard and understood, then we've done, we've made a step in the right direction. All right, so communication, we talked a bit about this. I want to spend a bit of time on this because this is really important, I think. And communicate. You don't know what you don't know, you know. This can be really stressful for managers or leaders, anyone in the organisation. If they have not been through fertility themselves, they don't know, and we can't expect them to know. So trying to manage someone who is on their fertility journey is very stressful for them as well. So I think when you look at that other side, this is why education, awareness, all of these things are so important, because it empowers our leaders and our managers with the right information and the knowledge to know what to do to best manage their employee who is struggling. The communication, I mean, 5 things that we say, and you know, I'm the first to admit it. I said it as well before I was on my fertility journey. Like, I didn't know, like, they're all well-meaning comments. Just relax, it will happen. There's always adoption. You're lucky you don't have kids yet. Have you tried XYZ? And at least you can sleep in, have a clean house. You've got the freedom. You know, you can go on holidays whenever you want to go on holidays, and they're all well-meaning and they're actually coming from a good place, but they can put you into that really, really dark place. You know, it used to trigger me, and my mental health would suffer as a result. You know, half the time I would end up in the disabled toilets crying because somebody just said to me, just relax, it will happen. And they were just trying to be nice. But you can't say that to someone who, especially if they are really struggling with mental health issues around their fertility journey, which every single person does. I do not know one person, I'm going to put it out there and say anyone who is struggling with fertility issues will suffer mental health issues to some extent at some point along the journey. It's inevitable. So you cannot, you are human, we all have a heart. It's impossible not to. Now, I want to show you the other side of the spectrum, you know, 5 things you can say to someone, and this is really important for managers as well. You know, what do we say to someone who is struggling? You know, a lot of the time we don't have to say anything. We just need to say, we're here to support you. You know, let us know how we can best accommodate your needs. Open the lines of communication. Create a safe space. You know, your health and well-being to us are a priority. Please feel free to take the time you need. You're not alone. We understand this is a challenging time, and it's okay to speak up. You know, we appreciate your hard work, and we're here to support you in any way you can. We can. We're really opening up, as I said, the lines of communication, showing support and saying, you know what, you don't have to say anything, but if you need help, if you need a roadmap forward, if you need something from us, we're here. And I'm going to open back up to Samantha and Glen and just ask your opinion or your thoughts on this part of the presentation, if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, I think half the time I think we just want to fix things. And I had a lot of people just say to me, like, you can have one of my kids. And I was like, I would love to have one of your kids. So don't say it too loudly because I'll take them. But I think sometimes sometimes it's just best to be silent and listen and say, that's shit. It's actually so much better to hear someone acknowledge that I'm in a really horrible spot.
I agree. As well-meaning as the advice is, sometimes it's just, you know, I'm here for you. I'm in this with you. I'm a shoulder to cry on. Here's a hand if you need something, you know, even offering support. You know, is there anything you need on the home front? You know, home cooked meals, like anything like that outside as well. If you're a colleague, is just showing support, but not being too intrusive, I think is really important. Glenn, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say that this slide's really good to obviously to start those conversations, and the previous slide was very relevant to us, particularly during COVID. The whole work from home and do the schooling from home and stuff was a bit of a trigger for me at the time. I guess I would say I don't want the takeaway, I guess, from my perspective to be this is something that you can't speak about. Like anything, if you're unsure about something or you're not quite you know, across the, you know, how things work, infertility being one of them, accessibility with other things being other examples. Just ask. People are happy to explain it. Just ask what, you know, what it means. Is it okay? You know, how should I speak to you? How should I communicate? What do you need? Is usually the best way, and infertility is not different to any of those other things when it comes to accessibility. So that would be my only addition.
I love that. And I think, you know, it's okay to say I don't understand. And I think you know, I would have really appreciated that as well. As you don't know what you don't know. So saying I don't understand, you know, I don't really understand how I can help, but I'm here, you know, can you explain it a bit more, like Glenn said, you know, or if you don't feel like saying anything, then, you know, I'm here in other ways for you. I think just makes that it's a little less taboo, really, and you just feel that little less isolated, because infertility feels very isolating. You feel like, even though that there's so many people in the world going through it, you feel like you're the only person. And like Glenn said earlier, I shut myself off from the world. I was a very social person, very outgoing person. I was at every work function. You know, we were always out and about, dinners, cocktails, drinks, socializing, friends, family, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And I turned into a person who, even at work, I was a recluse. I didn't talk to anyone. I was like head down, thumb up. I used to shut myself off from the world when I got home. I didn't even, you know, I missed Christmas a couple of times with my family because I just couldn't do it. You know, I would prefer to sit home with my dogs. And you know, it changes you. But I think once you have the right support, you know, they say a problem halved is a problem solved. And I don't think it's a problem solved, but a problem halved just makes you feel that little less alone, and just makes you feel, you know what, I'm not the only person and I can do it. You know, we will get through this. This is not forever. It's not the insurmountable mountain. You know, we can and we will. And I guess, you know, the thing is, not everyone ends up with a baby. That's the cold hard truth as well. And that's a whole nother webinar in itself. But the anxiety and the PTSD, it follows you afterwards. You know, once you fall pregnant, you know, it's still there with you. And I think even for me, you know, I struggled with postnatal depression as well. Like, it followed me, and I had to do the work. I had to get the support. I had to put a team of people in place to really help with my mental health. But once I got the support, you know, I was really able to navigate my way through that and see that this was just a season in my life, and there was a light at the other end. Okay, so we've talked about, I hope you've come away with a bit more of an idea of what is fertility, how it affects people who are struggling, you know, a day in the life, you know, and why it does matter in the workplace. I really hope that you can now see that we need to look at fertility through the lens of, well, a holistic lens. You know, our mental health is everything. If that's suffering, it doesn't matter what else is going on, we cannot function as humans, and we can't show up to work and give 100%. It's not possible. So what's my roadmap forward for you? And as I said, it's a lot easier than you think. And number one, you know, it's about raising awareness. So either a day, a week, a month, an infertility awareness, get you know, period of time. So let's start talking about, let's open the lines of discussion. I host lunch and learn webinars, you know, a series or one depending on the organization, and that is really about high level, starting the discussion. What is infertility? What does it look like? How does it feel for someone who is on their fertility journey? What do we say? What do we don't say? You know, if you think that there is someone who is struggling, what's the best approach there? You know, I also give a couple of really helpful tools and strategies to help manage stress in the workplace. And this is not just, these are amazing, valuable tools for anyone who is in the workplace, who is, you know, we live off stress, we normalize stress, and it's not okay to normalize stress. So we need to give strategies and tools to help calm our nervous system, so we can start thinking clearly, so we can calm our minds, and we can show up and we can give 110% to our workplace. And I just want to demonstrate the power of this webinar. One webinar I hosted one a couple of months ago. I had 4 people approach me afterwards. 4 people who were struggling with infertility. They hadn't told anyone in their workplace. And they said after that one webinar, they felt safe enough to talk to their HR or managers about it. 2 of them were in the late stages of leaving. One was in the final process of finding another job. And because of that webinar, they are now there, still in their organisation. You know, they're happy, they feel supported, and they've got a roadmap forward. And I think that's really important, that because of one hour discussion, 4 people stayed. 4 good people. And number 2, okay, let's roll out some education for line leaders and understand how they can best support their employees. So this is all about workshops, educational workshops. How can we support managers? As we said, it's stressful for them because they don't know what they don't know and they don't know how to manage. So this is adding more stress to their already stressful day. So this is inevitably, obviously, affecting their productivity as well. So it is about deep diving into really, looking out for the signs, how we can best manage our employees. What do we need to do? What do we need to say? What do they need from a practical perspective, and also a mental health perspective as well as a physical perspective. There's lots of different things that you can do on site that allow people to feel much more safe. We can create spaces where people can inject their IVF injections, administer their IVF injections. They don't have to go to the disabled toilet. Putting another fridge in the staff room for medication, stuff like this, so we don't have to hide it. So it's taking away, it's destigmatizing, it's taking away the taboo, and it's normalizing fertility, which is really, really important. The next, number 3, consulting. Reach out to consulting services that help build more inclusive policies, in communications. Or maybe you don't need to build out policies. Maybe your policies just need to be reviewed. So I think it's really important that when we review our policies or we create these policies, it's about understanding why we're doing it and communicating it to the organisation. Because it's all right that we have these policies, but if nobody knows why that they're there or why they're there, then they're not effective. And number 4, so paving ways to build out support networks. So this is really important, like on the ground work. How could we do that? One of the managers that I hosted a workshop, an educational workshop at the end of last year. One of the managers that was on site there was actually struggling with fertility himself. He was obviously the partner, but he had not felt safe saying anything to anyone in the organisation because he thought that it would adversely affect his career. So from that workshop, he was able to start to open the lines of communication with his HR team about putting a roadmap forward for him. And out of that, the HR team then put him through one of my 6-week group programs. So he was able to learn the tools and the strategies to successfully navigate his career and fertility journey at the same time. So this is a win-win for everyone. It's a win-win because they get to keep an awesome employee, and it's a win-win for him because he can now find the balance and he's able to give more to the organisation, which is really, really exciting. And that's the power of one half-day workshop as well. So all of these things are really simple to implement. The roadmap forward is really, really, as I said, simple to implement, but just so powerful. And I think fostering an environment, an inclusive and supportive environment where employees can truly feel supported, when they are going through one of life's toughest challenges is really the key takeaway that I want you to think about today. With nearly 20% of your organisation suffering, it is really something that needs to be at the top of the agenda. So what's the cost of inaction? Okay, so fertility challenges in the workplace can lead to increased absenteeism, reduced productivity, and higher turnover. ultimately costing organisations significantly in both talent and financial resources. So it affects profitability at the end of the day. And I guess as an organisation, that's the bottom line, isn't it? So by acting now on the forefront, we can prevent these losses and build a supportive, resilient and engaged workforce. Because if we don't act now, then it is, like I said, an invisible disease. So there's a lot of invisible factors happening behind the scenes that we do. You know, we could potentially, our productivity is starting to decline. We don't know why. Our people are struggling with fertility issues, and because we haven't started the conversation, we're not across it. We can't do anything about it. So I think it's really important to be on the front foot with all of this. All right. So I'm going to ask for any questions for any of us. Any questions at all, if it's personal related, professional, work related?
All right, I'll see you soon. All right, ciao.
No? Okay. Well, if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself. You can send me an email. And if it's a question for Samantha or Glen, please, I will pass it on and you can connect. I just want to thank you so much for your time. I know how busy everyone is, but I know how much you care by being here, and